If you were interested in the themes of A Little Life, but you were a little bit disappointed perhaps in how those themes were presented and how they were executed, I have a recommendation for you. If you are interested in themes of family dynamics, dysfunctional families, trauma, be it generational or otherwise, I have a recommendation for you. If you just want a superbly written, sad literary fiction, I have a recommendation for you, and that is Will and Testament by Vigdis Hjorth. Welcome back to StoryTube. Today I wanted to talk about a literary fiction book that nobody has ever heard of because I think it's amazing and more people should read it. So that is Will and Testament by Vigdis Hjorth. It is translated from Norwegian and it's a contemporary literary fiction. It came out within the last 10 years. I don't remember the exact year. And like I mentioned in the intro, it is about trauma and family dysfunction. So the basic setup of it is there's 4 siblings. The father dies. These siblings are all adults. They're in their 50s and 60s. The father dies and we have to deal with his will and testament. Now 2 of the siblings still had a good relationship with the parents and 2 of the siblings did not. And our main character and narrator is one of the 2 older siblings who are the ones that are estranged from the parents and have been for a while. Now trying to sell a literary fiction book just with the main premise of the plot is usually kind of difficult because it will be something like that. Oh, let's talk about somebody's will. How boring. But obviously it's a lot more theme heavy and it's a lot about the writing and about what it's trying to say. And in this case, we're in the head of the narrator the entire time. It's a first person and hers is the only perspective we really get. And one of the big things that this book deals with within the theme of trauma is what it does to memory. And it does so quite subtly, and it comes out just in how that narration works. So it's written almost in vignette form a lot of the time, where you have chapters that are extremely short, sometimes half a page, sometimes 2 pages, 3 pages, not often more than that. And we're jumping back and forth in time constantly and just kind of getting a full picture of what is going on in the present and everything that's led up to it as a puzzle that you're putting together. And you're not meant to put it together in a very precise way because the narrator contradicts herself. Like sometimes she'll say that she's been estranged from her parents for 25 years. Sometimes she'll say that it's been 15 years, but then she has several different recollections of, oh, the last time I spoke to them, and then I never spoke to them again for 20 years, but then there's a memory that's more recent than that where she's speaking to them. So she is kind of piecing it together at the same time that you're piecing it together, which is a really interesting experiment in how it's written, and I think it works extremely well in conveying how what she's gone through in her life has affected the way her brain works and the way she sees the world, but also the way she sees herself and the way she operates and thinks and remembers things. I did mention A Little Life straight away in the beginning of this video, and full disclaimer before I talk a little bit more about why I did that, I haven't read A Little Life, so take whatever I say about it with a pinch of salt. I'm speaking purely based on what I have read about A Little Life, what I've heard from other people that have read it and either loved it or not loved it so much. So it's all kind of coming from a third-person accounts, so to speak. The reason I bring it up is that there are multiple people that I've talked to about this book that have read A Little Life and had issues with it, and they all separately kind of had the same thing to say in terms of that this is kind of doing what A Little Life wanted to do in their mind. Now, I can't speak to that because, like I said, I haven't read it. However, from what I hear about A Little Life, what I gather about that book is that it is quite depressing, I think that's fair to say, and bleak, and there's no real relief from that bleakness. Feel free to correct me if that is not the case. What Will and Testament does is it has some similar themes and just subject matter in terms of what characters go through, but it is never explicit in the traumatic experiences. It is always focused on the mind and the emotional repercussions and how this person is feeling and dealing with the traumatic thing. It's not like it's necessarily like danced around, and it definitely isn't afraid of punching you in the face with some sentences. Like there's so many parts that I wanted to highlight as I was reading it. I don't really do that with books because I'm terrified of soiling the book, but sometimes I'm tempted to, and with this book I really was. Like there are incredible passages in here that then end with a feeling like you got ice cold water dumped on your face. It's definitely not pulling punches in that regard, but it's doing so on an emotional level and by sometimes withholding information until exactly the right point and then pulling the rug out from under you, even if you might know what's coming, but then it's presented in a certain way or from a certain angle that you might not be expecting, and it makes it all that more impactful. I also think that you don't have to have gone through any specific things that are mentioned in this book to relate to maybe other little things that are going on, like in terms of just a family trying to deal with the death of its patriarch, and dealing with something like that as adults, and then having the dynamics from when they were a lot younger coming back to haunt them, even if they might not want that. It's an incredibly layered book where there are characters that you could see as villainous that I certainly hated, but they're very nuanced, and sometimes you understand where they're coming from. Sometimes you're not sure whether you should be extending the benefit of the doubt or not. And in that way, it's a really challenging read, but beautifully written. I couldn't stop reading this. So it's not overly long. It's about 320 pages. And I read it in about 2 days. Even though the subject matter is very heavy, the prose really flows very nicely. And it also made me want to pick up a couple of Scandinavian authors that are just kind of mentioned in an offhand kind of way throughout the book. Like it does have a sense of place, even though most of it is happening in the main character's mind. And if you want a little bit of behind the scenes, so to speak, gossip. So this is considered autofiction in a way, where it's not a memoir, but it is heavily inspired by the author's real life. The author has never explicitly said that she's drawing from real events. However, after she published this book, her family, her sister and her mother, I believe, kicked up a fuss about it and complained about it and denounced it and said it wasn't true and how dare she and things like this, to the point that her sister took a creative writing course and wrote her own book detailing the same events from her perspective, called Free Will. I'm actually not sure if that's translated into English. It's all happening in Norwegian. But you know, and through these actions, one might think that they confirmed that this book comes from somebody's real experiences, which is just kind of funny. But yeah, there's some behind the scenes gossip. I also think, from what I've heard, that the author's, I'm not sure if ex-husband or ex-partner, also wrote something from like his perspective. So there's a whole subgenre of Norwegian Vigdis Hjorth fiction at this point, which is just kind of a fascinating little bit of information, I think. But anyway, in case that makes you more interested in the book in any way, I think it's a phenomenal book. I think it's a really great work of literary fiction. That is, it has a specific style, but the style is there for a reason, because it mirrors the theme and not just to try to be pretentious and special and different, which I appreciate because sometimes it's not the case. I don't really want to say more. I don't want to spoil anything about the book, although I do think that it's the kind of book where if you know what happens, you can still get something out of it reading it, because it's all about that experience of how it's written and really going through the I guess internal journey that the character goes through. But I would love for more people to read this book. I think it's an incredible book. It really, really stuck with me. It's one of my favorite books I've read this year, and it's such an obscure little find that I'm so grateful was recommended to me by a couple of my colleagues, actually. So let me know in the comments if you've read it. I would love to know what your thoughts were, if you liked it, if you didn't like it. If you've also read A Little Life, let me know if that comparison made any sense to you, or if I'm completely off with my idea of what A Little Life is. I do own the book. I will try it someday, but not right now. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the comments. Give the video a like if you liked it, and if you want to see more reviews like this on the channel. I think we'd both like to do some more short reviews of just random books that we read that we think are really good, that other people might not have heard of because they're not talked about very broadly. So if you're interested in that, give this video a like, let us know that you want more of that, and we'll see you next time.